Hello there. I'm Dr. Yasmine Ali, cardiologist and best-selling author, and welcome to my podcast, Positive Vibes on the Sunny Side. This episode, I have an exciting, very fun interview with another award-winning author, Barbara Evers, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So stay tuned. Hello again. I'm delighted to welcome Barbara Evers to the Positive Vibes podcast today. I had the good fortune to meet Barbara at a writers' conference a few years ago and have followed her work and her newsletter ever since. So, Barbara is the author of multiple fantasy novels, many of which are award-winning, and all of which she describes as matriarchal fantasies with clever animals. Don't you just love that? Her fantasy trilogy, The Watchers of Moniah, won the Imadjinn, and that's Jinn, the Arabic jinn for genie, Imadjinn Best Fantasy Novel twice. And her collection, Pieces of Her, includes award-winning stories, including a Pushcart Prize nominee. Barbara has a BA in zoology from Clemson University in South Carolina and a Master of Arts in Professional Communication, also from Clemson. She says she's retired now, although, as you'll see, I would hardly count all the work she is doing with her authorship, speaking, and animal advocacy as retirement, but rather as the next stage of life, which is something you know we discuss often here on Positive Vibes. Barbara also has a very special place in her heart for giraffes, and I can't wait for you to hear all about that as well. So, Barbara, welcome to Positive Vibes.
Thank you so much, Yasmine. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I am delighted to have you here, and it really is an honor having an award-winning author on the show today. I can't wait for people to hear about your career path and what you're doing now. And so, speaking of which, tell us a little bit about what it is you are doing now. Let's start with that background because I know you have a very full life.
Yeah, I have a lot going on. You know, the person who wears a lot of hats, that's always been me.
Yep.
That's always been me. In fact, my dad years ago said, "You can't burn the candle at both ends all the time, Barbara. You will watch." So, I have a lot going on right now. I am actually started working on a book about editing. And
Oh,
so I'm in the first stages of putting that together. And then actually, I had a blog for over 10 years that was a writing blog. And so I've just finished going through all the posts that I saved and putting them into categories that will fit chapters within the book.
oh,
So
great.
I'm working on that. I just finished a major rewrite on Plunged in Purple, which is my next fantasy novel, which will be more contemporary fantasy as opposed to epic fantasy, which is what the Watchers of Moniah series is. And in fact, I printed it all out today. I have to let it sit for a week. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to be reading through it to make sure there's no weird hiccups before I try to submit that one. And let's see what else. You probably know because of my newsletter that I was trying to put together a book called Giraffing Around,
Mhm.
which was a middle grade book that's nonfiction about giraffes with all sorts of photographs that I actually took of giraffes. Now, I've not been to Africa. There's a reason why that has not happened. It was supposed to, but it didn't. But that's okay because you can still see giraffes and feed giraffes and do all sorts of things with giraffes in the United States. So I have a lot of pictures of giraffes that I've taken. And actually, I spent some time on a webinar today with a printer that may be the solution to the problem I ran into with this book.
Oh,
So
good.
it was close. I had it all laid out and everything and sent to the printer slash distributor back in November. And luckily, I just did author copies because I wasn't sure what the photos were going to come out like, and they didn't come out well.
Yeah.
So I had to put it on the back burner for a little while, but I'm back on it now because I love this book. I
Yeah,
want to get it
yeah.
out because it's a wonderful companion to the Watchers of Moniah series because of the telepathic giraffes in the fantasy series. So that is kind of what's going on with the current working around writing kind of things happening. And I've got some conferences coming up. And oh, I'm judging a few contests right now too, because I'm an idiot and I can't say no.
Wow, you are really, really staying busy, and I can relate to that. I think my listeners know I can relate to that. And I love the little behind the scenes you gave my listeners there about what we authors go through to try and put out quality books in print books in this day and age.
Mhm.
Because, ebooks can be a lot easier, but when you want to do a high quality print book that somebody can hold in
Right.
their hands, that's a whole different ball game. So I'm glad, and I know you've been seeking out a good way to do this giraffe book for many months now. So I'm glad to hear you
I
may have
have.
finally found the way forward. Yeah. So speaking of you mentioned telepathic giraffes, which is not something people hear about very often. So why don't you tell us about the Watchers of Moniah, that trilogy, and the
Okay.
giraffes and all of that?
Okay, so it took me a while to come up with this, but if you go to enough events, you have to present the concept of your books very quickly when people are walking around at the different author tables and everything. And it took me about a year into the series to finally nail down what I tell people. So this is my basic blurb that I would tell you if you walked up to me or asked me about my books somewhere. You have a warrior princess,
Okay.
a dying queen, a shocking deathbed decree, a traitor returned from the dead, and telepathic giraffes. And a lot of times when I tell people that, when I get to the and, I say, "Are you ready?"
Yeah.
And they go, "Yeah." I say, "No, you're not."
No.
And invariably, I get laughter because they don't expect that to come from me. Then they look at my table and see all the giraffe stuff and go, "Oh, well, that kind of makes sense," because I have giraffe stuff all over my table. Now, the conference I was at with you, I had a small portion of a table that I shared with someone. So I
Yeah.
didn't have as much of my stuff there. And I
Yeah.
have a big banner now that I don't think I had at that point
No.
either.
No, I don't recall
Um,
that either.
so, and the banner actually has my author photo, which of course is me with a giraffe head coming down over and me grinning at it and
Is
everything.
that the photo that's on your website?
Yes, that's
Okay,
my author photo.
we're going to link to your website in the show notes, but go ahead and tell everyone the URL for your website.
So it's really easy. It's Barbara V, and that's the V is in Victor, barbaraevers.com. And Evers is spelled just like the word ever, just add an S to it. So barbaraevers.com. Now I realize I explained all of that, but the word people misspell the most is Barbara. So
Because they probably spell it with an E or
yeah,
rather than
Barbara
two A's.
Streisand kind of messed it up over the years. Barbara is, it actually comes from the word barbarian,
Mhm.
which that means the name Barbara means a stranger in a foreign land. When I was a kid, I didn't like that. As an adult, I think that's pretty cool since I write about foreign lands that I make up.
Right.
But Barbara is bar a. So if you get that right, you're good.
Yes, yes, very good. And again, listeners, I will have a link directly to the website so you can hop on over there and see that great picture of Barbara with the giraffe. And we are going to talk more about giraffes later on in the interview, but I want to get back to how you started writing fantasy in the first place. Was that something you were doing like as a kid, or how did that come about?
So I didn't start writing fantasy until in my 30s, but been creating, I wouldn't say writing, I've been creating stories since I was small. And the reason why I say I wouldn't say writing is I have an aunt. She's passed away now, all my aunts and uncles. I'm old enough that they're all moved on. But I was in my late 20s. We were at a family reunion and she said, "So, how's your writing going?" And I looked at her and I said, "How did you know I write?"
Wow.
And she told me, "Well, we came down there to visit you one time when you were little and you couldn't write, but you dictated short stories to me."
Huh.
And I said, "I did." don't remember this. But she
Wow.
says, yeah, you were creating all these creative stories and you had me write them down. And I said, do you have them? She goes, no, I wish. I so wish. Who knows what? I'm imagining I
Yeah.
was probably 4 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
Because back then, we teach kids to read a lot earlier than they did when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Most of the time, you didn't learn your alphabet or to read until you were in the first grade
Hmm.
back when I was growing up. I did go to kindergarten. Um, and we did sing the alphabet song, which I did not know, so I hummed along. Uh, they didn't try to teach it to us. Some of the kids knew it, some of us didn't. But the minute I started to read, my doors, my windows opened up. Because
Yeah.
and reading's been a passion ever since. But I've always created stories. I've always written little things. It wasn't until my 30s, though, that I started reading fantasy. I was not For one thing, I wasn't aware of fantasy as a genre.
Uh-huh.
Technically, I had read fantasy because you read things like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or books along those lines, but you don't really think about it because you're reading kids' books and things along those lines, and so it's imagination, fairy
Right.
tales. They're all of those things. Um, I was writing primarily contemporary stories up until my 30s. And I hit a point where I wanted to read something different.
Yeah.
So I went to my brother, who always was a science fiction fan. And I think part of the reason I also never discovered fantasy was because I kind of had this, that's what my brother reads. So I'm not going to read that sort of
Uh-huh.
attitude. You know how it is, siblings, they can be weird.
Yep.
So I told him, I said, look, I'd be willing to try something that you recommend, but I need it to be semi-realistic.
Hmm.
I don't want this really out of the wild, some wild story that's way off there. I want to be able to suspend my disbelief, in other words. I didn't know that phrase back then. You
Right.
learn that as an author that if you're writing, especially in the speculative area, people have to be able to suspend their disbelief. So he gave me Catherine Kerr's Dareny series, and I started reading that. He gave me just the first book, and I loved it. And it was very much almost like written in Catholicism with fantasy overlay. It was
Wow.
really interesting. So he did exactly what I asked. He gave me something that felt like it could be really real.
Mhm.
And from that point on, I just, started looking for things. I found stuff on my own. For years, he continued to give me books. I joke, I occasionally find myself on panels at cons talking about Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series.
Mhm.
And I've been at Jordan Con and whatever. And I love to tell people the story of when I got the first book, which is The Eye of the World.
Yeah.
And my brother gave it to me. It was probably a year or two after Jordan published the first book. And he gave me that book at Christmas and he said, the good news about this is a series. It's going to be 6 books. Haha. It's going to be 6 books, and 3 of them are already published. So when you finish this one, you can go on to the next one. And by the time you're done with the third, the fourth should be out. And it's only going to be 6 books. Now it's something like 13, 15. I don't remember how many books it is. I've read them all. But,
Wow. Yeah.
but it was just kind of funny how he told me that. And then Jordan just continued to just dig this deeper and deeper, deeper well of stories until it became this massive thing. And it took a while. I didn't initially read all of the books. I kind of faded off for a while, but I eventually came back
Yeah.
and read every last one, reread some of them as the Wheel of Time series came out too. But it was after reading the Wheel of Time that I started creating fantasy ideas in my brain. So it was
Ah.
kind of like um, a way of tickling my brain and my inspiration. It was a muse to some degree for me. And I created this story, The Watchers of Moniah, and I worked on it a very long time.
Yes. I can relate to that too.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the first book in the trilogy is called The Watchers of Moniah.
right.
Okay. And the second book, the title is?
The Watchers in Exile. So here we have, let's see, there's the Watchers
Yep.
of Moniah, and I'm going to slide.
Uh-huh.
There's the Watchers in Exile,
Uh-huh.
and then I'll come back this way, and there is the Watchers at War. That's the third and final book of the trilogy.
So, for those who are listening audio only, Barbara is pointing to the backdrop she has behind her, and I'm going to put a link to the YouTube channel. So, if you want to see that, you can look at that too. And of course, all of her book covers are going to be on her website as well. So
Yes.
you'll be able to click those links and get right there. Okay, so so you did that trilogy. Did you know when you started the first book that it was going to be a trilogy?
No,
Hmm.
no. I thought it was going to be a duology, to
Hmm.
be truthful with you. And if you're not familiar with that term, that just means two books in the series instead of three books in the series. Um, and there's a long story that I won't spend a lot of time on, but The Watchers of Moniah initially was a book that took me, because of what else was going on in my life, it took me probably 7 years to write. And the majority of what I wrote actually happened in those last 2 years because I'd found a writing critique group and I was beginning to learn more about things and how writing should be done and how we do it today versus what I learned when I was in high school from my creative writing teacher, who, by the way, is a lovely woman and reads my books. But
Great.
she does, and she's this. The fact that she's impressed with what I do means more to me than anybody else
Yeah.
because that woman I she's the reason why I stuck to it, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. Little sidebar, because I have to just give her heads up. Her name is Mary Seaman. And when I was 17, I took journalism and composition from her. Journalism was one semester, composition was the next, and composition was basically creative writing.
Hmm.
And she told me near the end of that semester that if I really worked at it, I could go somewhere with it. And that kept me going for years and years and years because I didn't publish my first story. I'm trying to think. Well, I had one story published in college, and it was an honorable mention in a contest. And then there's this dearth,
Hmm.
this long dearth. And I started publishing short stories somewhere around 2008. And The Watchers of Moniah actually didn't get published till December of 2020.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was a long time coming. And I was doing other stuff in between. But that first book actually became the first two books
Okay.
because I had an agent who I met at a conference because I'm a firm believer, writers, if you're interested in writing and you're writing a book, don't wait till you're done. Go to the conferences now
Yes,
because you
I
will learn
agree.
so much. I don't know how many times I talk to people who are like, well, my book's not done. Well, that's the perfect time to go to the writing, conference. That's the
Right.
perfect time to join a critique group, to take a writing class before you're done so you can stop making the mistakes you're making and you can, you'll have less work to do on revision. But anyway, I digress.
No, and it gives you the
I got
momentum. It gives you the momentum to finish that
it
little oomph,
does.
you know?
It does because also you get people talking about your characters to you.
Right.
And a lot of times they're talking to you like in a critique group like they're real people, and
Yes.
so it makes them even more vivid for you. But anyway, this agent, I met her at a conference. She was very interested in the series. She actually told me it reminded her of Dune, which
Hmm.
blew my mind.
Hmm.
um, and I still don't quite get that connection, to be honest with you, but she
Maybe
loved
the
Dune, and I wasn't going to argue with her,
epic scale of it. And yeah, you don't want to argue with that. So-
No, you don't. So, but she said, please send the whole thing to me. So I sent it to her, and she came back and she said, I love it, but I think we actually need to take this book and split it in half,
Ah.
and you need to write more about this period in the book that you skip over. So, what I had done initially, I wrote the first book from the inside out, if
Uh-huh.
that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
The what was initially my first chapter is around page 200 and something in The
Is
Watchers of Moniah.
Oh wow, is that right? So really, really from
Yeah,
the middle of the book. That's you started at what became the middle of the book. Huh.
I started what became the middle of the book, and people kept asking questions. So I created a prologue that kind of explained a little bit more about the giraffes and who the Watchers are. And then from the prologue, I tried to skip to the point where that first chapter was. Well, there was a couple of years jump there. And she said, I want to know what happened there. Well, the problem was I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah, you had to come up with it.
It's like, I don't know what happened there. We're just going to go on over here, And so I skipped it. And she said, I want you to write that section. And she says, and then you'll need more, obviously, in the second part. So we figured out the place to cut it. And then I had to enhance the rest of that second half. So I went from, it was like 103,000 words before I split it.
Ah,
And I wrote somewhere in the vicinity of 60,000 more words between the two books. Is that right? No, more than that.
yeah, I think more than
Because the
that.
first book is 96,000 words. The second book is 90,000 words. So I wrote on roughly 80,000 more words and enhanced the first book and enhanced the second book. And a lot of people, she hadn't signed me. And a lot of people tell you, don't do that if the
Yeah,
agent hasn't signed you.
yeah,
But what went on in the back of my mind is she has a point. And even if this doesn't work, I could always use this as a novella
right.
or some short stories or something. I'll find a way to use it. So I went on and did it. She did not, she passed on the book anyway, which was
Oh,
heartbreaking. But,
oh,
things happen for the right reason. She kind of disappeared off of the publishing arena about a year later, completely disappeared.
huh.
And I don't know what happened to her.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm going to
so,
insert for listeners here I know a lot of my listeners don't know again, behind the scenes of how publishing works. And so for authors who want to be what's called traditionally published by a major house, most of the books that you see in your usual bookstore are from a traditional publisher, although that is slowly changing. And as you all know, my first book was traditionally published. My second book, my novel, was published under my own imprint as an independent author, and the rest of my books will be as well. But to get that traditional publisher, you almost always need an agent to represent you. So first, this is what Barbara's talking about, was getting an agent for her first book. And then if the agent signed a contract with her to represent her basically, then the agent would take her book to the different publishers and try to get a publisher then to pick it up. And then a couple of years later, if the publisher did pick it up, the publisher, you'd find it in a bookstore. It's a long process. So,
very long.
so yeah, so this is what we're talking about here. This Barbara trying to get this agent, and then she did all this work for the agent who then sort of disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
But
what
it's
happened?
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's okay. What ended up happening, I started, I had written those two, and I knew the series wasn't done, but I had, I had attempted and queried so many different agents at that point, and it wasn't coming through. You hear people talk about like J.K. Rowling, and she,
yeah.
you know, she had 12 rejections. Oh, big whoop! I had 50. You know,
Hey, I had 75.
there you go. There
But
you
you
go.
just
So
need one. Yes.
you just need one. Just need one. And there's a lot of reasons they reject. And it's not always that the book story is not good. A lot of times it's because either the agency won't take it, or they don't know who to send it to, or they just signed something very similar.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different reasons that they don't take something on. And so it doesn't, if you're a writer and you're in that process, don't let it get you down. Don't let it get
Absolutely.
you down. Now, of course, during all this time, people kept saying, well, why don't you just self publish? And I didn't want to. Now, self publishing at that time was
Mhm.
still kind of a negative reputation. It's
And
not
that
as
was
much now.
exactly, and that was why I didn't self-publish my first book. At that
Mhm.
time, we did not have the tools or the reputation or everything we have now. Yeah,
Right. We just didn't have it. And people who self published did it poorly.
right.
In most cases, not all of them. Some of them did a really, really good job,
Hmm.
but they were the needle in the haystack back then.
Yeah.
And there was this reputation that you had to overcome. And I didn't want to try to deal with that. So I had my dream, my eyes set there. You have to sometimes let go of those, by the way.
Mhm.
And what ended up happening in 2020, we're all the way up to 2020, March 2020, right before everything shuts down. I went to a conference called Saga. It's held in Charlotte, North Carolina. Look it up. It's a good conference. And I met three separate publishers who were small to medium presses. Now, small to medium presses, you typically don't use an agent.
Mhm.
You go straight to the publisher. And I pitched the Watchers to all three, and all three said, send me pages.
Mhm.
So I was all of a sudden on this roll. And I sent it to all three, and I heard nothing. Everything shuts down. It was July when I heard back from one of them. And he said, are you still interested in publishing, or have you signed with someone? And I said, no, I'm still open. So I ended up signing with that publisher. I'm not going to mention them. And there's a reason why I'm no longer with them. And so I don't want to get into that part of it. But they were willing to publish the series if I wrote the third book before the first book was published.
Ah, okay.
So we're in July. And he
Hmm.
says, I'd really like to publish the first book in December.
Wow.
I
You have to
wrote The
write the
Watchers
third
at
book.
War. I wrote The Watchers at War in 3 months.
Wow, Barbara.
I did. Because all of a sudden I had the fuel that I needed to finally do it. And I
Yeah.
did something different with that one that I did with the first two. I don't know if you ever talk to people about pantsing and plotting. I'm
Yes.
what you call a pantser.
You have to
Yeah,
explain what that means.
not a problem. I'm a pantser, which means I kind of write by the seat of my pants.
Mhm.
I know in general what's going to happen in the story. I probably have an idea what the beginning is and what the end is and kind of what's going to happen in the middle, but I don't have a chapter by chapter outline of every single thing that's going to happen.
Mhm.
There are other authors who literally outline the entire book.
James
Chapter one,
Patterson being one of the
yeah,
most famous ones. He has an
yeah,
outline for every book, very detailed. Yeah.
very detailed.
Mhm.
And they'll all they have to do is then look at the outline and start writing.
Mhm.
Now, I have weird stuff happen when I'm writing. So even if I did the outline, it would go out the window really fast because there's scenes that happen in these books. And every writer will tell you this, by the way, even the plotters.
Yep.
And the plotters are the ones who outline. But I can't create that way for some reason.
Mhm.
I have to do this kind of natural organic flow.
Mhm.
So the third book, I realized it's epic fantasy. Epic fantasy means you have multiple storylines. You have multiple points of view. You have somebody over here and somebody over here and somebody over here and somebody over there. And there's all these different things going on. And the one thing I wanted to be sure of is that no story was left unfinished.
Mhm.
I needed to make sure I tied off every thread on that thing. So I made a very, very reduced outline
Ah, okay.
just to be sure that everything was in there. And I'll tell you what, I started writing, and all of a sudden, I was like, a few days into writing, all of a sudden I went, Quilla. I didn't put Quilla in there. And Quilla's a pretty important character. So it helped me remember. And it was not a chapter by chapter. It was just the different ideas of where these people are, because at least I knew where they were and I knew where we needed to go. So that helped me write that last book. And the last book actually is 116,000 words, and I wrote it in 3 months.
That's unbelievable. And just to give people an idea, 116,000 words is how many pages for a usual paperback book?
I think the print on that is somewhere around 400 and something pages.
And you wrote
Yeah,
that in 3 months.
in 3 months.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is just amazing to me. Given how long it takes me to write a book, it's
Well, some books take longer. Plunged in Purple, the one I just finished the revision on, It was a book that I had started writing. And then when this offer came along to publish The Watchers, I stopped writing it.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then after all of that happened, and some of the stuff that happened where I ended up having to turn around and republish the books under my own imprint, I finally went back to Plunge. And so that one's taking long, but it's taking long because of interruption,
Yes.
as opposed
Yes.
to that. The other two books that are sitting up there are kind of things I put out in the meantime.
Hmm.
Pieces of Her is actually not fantasy. It is contemporary short fiction. The tagline on it is Being a Woman is Not for the Faint of Heart. And several of the stories in there are stories I have had published somewhere else in an anthology of some kind. There are two stories in there that have never been published previously, and I put them in that book. And obviously, these are stories about women in various circumstances.
Hmm.
The Nature of the Beast is speculative fiction. It's primarily fantasy. It has some things that verge on horror or supernatural, but it also has dragons and shifters, and
Hmm.
it has bugs and snakes and spiders and otters and wolves and all sorts of stuff. But it's all short fiction also.
Oh, it's
And
so these short stories, a
those are
collection
short
of.
stories
Okay.
also. So what I found I can do is I had all this backlog of short stories that I
Hmm.
could put something together and put
Great.
it out there. And like you read my newsletter, so I put short stories every other month. I put a short story in the
Yeah,
newsletter,
and I don't know how you
and
do
those are
that either. That's that blows my
well,
mind that you can do that every other month.
it's a challenge, but I'm forcing myself to do it to make myself write other
Hmm.
things.
Yes.
And so the Nature of the Beast, some of the stories in there actually are from the newsletter, revised. The
Ah.
newsletter, often you get an early draft, not maybe a final draft. Some of them are stories that, for whatever reason, never found a place. I never found the right location for them. So I went on and put them in here myself. Um, some of my best stories are two that did not get published somewhere else. One is called Raker's Return, and it's a dragon story.
Oh.
And the other one's called Buggers. And it's the one that I didn't know I could write horror. I did.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and
So,
in
wow,
both
so
cases, they were written for something, and that didn't pan out.
you are a multiple genre author, as I am, and I
Yeah.
I really, I really like that. And I want to go back to something you mentioned about speculative fiction because that category, that name, speculative fiction, wasn't, to my knowledge, wasn't around when I was reading fantasy in high school and or science fiction in high school. And so when I think of like epic fantasy, what you've described, creating that world where you can suspend disbelief because the world, once you step into it, seems real. I think the prime example of that is the J.R.R. Tolkien books, The Lord of the
Mhm.
Rings and The Hobbit. I think most people are familiar with that. That's, or as you mentioned before, C.S. Lewis's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that whole series. You step into this world that the author has created. It's like magic if it's done well, and you clearly do it well. So go
Thank you.
back though to speculative fiction and what that means to you and to in the industry. How is that different from just fantasy?
Speculative is like an umbrella or a catch-all. So science fiction, and all the subgenres of science fiction,
Okay.
fantasy and all of its subgenres, horror and all of its subgenres. You have something unusual or not real in our world that is in speculative fiction. So you will often find science fiction, fantasy, and horror all lumped under it. And there's tons of subgenres under there.
Mhm.
Like epic fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy. Romantasy, which is big these days, is a subgenre of fantasy. It's also a subgenre of romance.
Right. Yes.
So it's a speculative romance. Um, I don't write romantasy, by the way. I don't write, I prefer not to write spicy.
Hmm.
So some people like spicy. If you're looking for spicy, you're not going to find it with me. And
Well,
it's
me
okay. That's
me
not a
either.
problem. It's not a problem. I know that there's an audience there. It's perfectly
Absolutely.
fine if you love that audience, And I won't say I never read romantasy because I do read some of it, but I prefer to write. What I have begun to say in events is my books are accessible, which means
Mm,
anyone can read them.
right. Yes.
So your granny can read them and your 13-year-old can read them. Now, I
Yes.
was surprised when 13-year-olds started reading the Watchers of Moniah, to be honest with you. My target audience was 20 to 40
Ah,
female.
okay.
That was my target audience. And the original covers that the previous publisher did had a very cartoonish look to them. So immediately people thought they were books aimed at kids. And I had people say, can my 6-year-old read this? And it's like, if they're an avid reader, maybe, but they might not understand all the words.
Yeah, right. It wasn't written
So
for a 6-year-old. Yeah.
the voice was adult, but one of the things I learned is, and this is one of the reasons why you go to conferences and critique groups and classes, is if your protagonist is a teenager, your book's going to get labeled YA.
Young adult, YA. Yeah. Hmm.
Even if your voice is not YA, but the YA voice has grown up a lot in the last few years anyway. So some people think my books are YA, some people say they're epic fantasy. If you have an avid reader who's in their teens, they can manage these books. If they're I read occasionally kind of reader, these books may be a little bit much for them yet.
Yeah.
I have actually had, oh, I got to tell you this because this was so cool. Halloween, I had a young lady show up at my door dressed as a watcher.
Oh my goodness.
It
That's a
was
big
the
win.
coolest. It was the coolest thing. And the irony is, I had met her, and she was 12, and you wouldn't have known it to see her because she was really tall. I had met her when she was 4 because she lives in my neighborhood.
Wow.
And that was, you know, somewhere a few years after the grandkids came to live with us. So all of a sudden, we were doing the trick or treating thing too.
Yes.
And we have a neighbor who has a lot of children. And usually the kids would gather at their house and then they'd all go in this bunch trick or treating together. And I'm sure the parents had a lot to do with the fact that they were all together because the parents then were kind of all together too. But there was this little girl, I can remember so vividly. She had on a fairy outfit with giraffe leggings and a giraffe tail. And she may have had a giraffe headband too. I don't remember. I have a
Oh,
picture of her because I spoke to the parents and I just loved it. I said, can I take a picture of her? And they said, sure. So I did. And I went back and I found it after this girl showed up at my door because this was that child. And what happened is, of course, the Watchers wasn't out when I
that's
met them.
amazing.
And I told them that I was writing this book that had giraffes in it. And
Oh,
on their own, they found it when it came out. And
oh, that's
the father read like the first half of the first book before he'd let his daughter read it because she was 12, but she's a fanatic about giraffes.
yeah.
And so she read the whole series. She dressed as a watcher. And I
Mm.
knew she was coming because her brother kind of let the cat out of the bag. He came earlier and he said, do you write the Watchers of Moniah? And I'm like, yeah. My sister's coming. She's dressed as a watcher. I was like, what?
Oh, wow,
But I'm
wow, wow.
glad he told me because I went and got something out of my swag stuff to give her. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I was prepared for it. The parents were like, "You're kidding," and the mama dressed up in a onesie that was a giraffe onesie.
That's so great.
It
I
was
love it.
so cool, so
Oh,
cool.
oh my goodness. Now that's unforgettable, Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah, for an author, that's incredible. Wow. So we keep talking about giraffes. Let's talk some more about giraffes because you don't just write them into your stories. You are an advocate for them and for their welfare and for so tell us more about that.
Okay. So first of all, I don't know when this will air, but June 21st is World Giraffe Day. And World Giraffe Day is the longest day. in the northern hemisphere and the longest night in the southern hemisphere. So
It is, in fact, June 21st is the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, as you've said, and it is one of my favorite days of the year because it is the summer solstice. And when I saw that it was also Giraffe Day, I knew it had to be because it's the longest something. So,
it is. So the Giraffe Conservation Foundation, and they are found in Namibia, Africa, decided, I don't remember how many years ago, it's been a while, but they decided to make June 21st World Giraffe Day because of that longest part. Because let's face it, what do you think of when you think of a giraffe? The long neck, the tall, they're very
yep.
tall, all that stuff. So that made sense to them. So that's what they did. And it is a day where people try to recognize giraffes because giraffes, a lot of people don't realize, are actually endangered. They have been suffering for the last few decades what has been called a silent extinction.
Mm.
And the reason it's called silent is because they haven't gotten the publicity that rhinos and elephants and some of the other animals, all worthy of notice, but some of the other animals have received. But their numbers have dwindled drastically. In fact, I was trying to look that data up today because I'm going to put it in my newsletter this month. I think there was something along the lines of, I forget what percentage, but they felt like in the last 60 years, the numbers had dwindled so much. And the
Wow.
problem was most people were researching the other animals.
Uh-huh.
Nobody was researching giraffes. So you have the fantasies, and give me a second. Her name is Stephanie, and her husband's name is, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to just say Dr. Fantasy.
Okay.
Because I've spoken to Stephanie. I've never spoken to him, but he's the one who actually was doing the research. And he came time for him, he was in his PhD to determine what he was going to research. And he was trying to decide between elephants and giraffes. And I heard him talk about this. So if I misquote, I got it from him. Okay. He realized there was a lot of information on elephants. There
Uh-huh.
was almost nothing on giraffes.
Yeah.
So if you're going to research something, why research something everybody else has researched? Research something that nobody else can say that's wrong. You know?
Oh, oh, that's great.
And in the process, they began to recognize that giraffe numbers were they were not good.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers have improved recently. There was, when I first started talking about Giraffe Conservation Foundation, their numbers said there were about 111,000 giraffes in the wild. Now, you got to keep in mind that's between 4 species of giraffes, not subspecies, species. So some of them were very, very small numbers, like under 600, under 6,000 in the
Wow.
wild. A lot of their territory had been taken to urban crawl and all sorts of other things. And so last I heard, the numbers are way better. They're at least, I know I heard a number of 117,000 about a year ago. I think the number's actually better than that now. And they do things like translocation of giraffes. So they locate a place that should have had giraffes and at one point did, but for whatever reason, the giraffes are no longer there. And they work towards transporting a certain number of giraffes there. And this is an expensive, involved
Yeah.
process, but they do it.
Yeah.
They also tag the giraffes. So they've got a lot of giraffes that they have tagged over the years, and they're tracking their movement and everything. And they're learning so much about it, giraffes. But the irony is, there's been some times where I've asked Stephanie a question. She goes, you know what? You might need to ask a zookeeper because they have close up connections to giraffes. We don't really get the close up connection.
Right.
So they're about the education and the protecting them in the wild and teaching, trying to prevent poachers. And there's all sorts of different things that they're doing there. So I give 5% of my royalties to the Giraffe Conservation Foundation. And it's giraffeconservation.org is their website.
Okay, I'll
So
definitely
look
have
them
the
up.
link. Hmm.
Yeah, look them up. June 21st is World Giraffe Day. And even if you can't give, share stuff about them. If you can't find something to share, hop over to my Facebook page. or my Instagram, and I'll almost always have something, or even their pages. They have a Facebook and an Instagram page too. But even if you can't give, you can share the information.
Right, right. You know, I mentioned this to you earlier. Cardiologists have been interested in giraffes because a
Mhm.
lot of people don't realize to get blood to from a giraffe's heart to their head is actually a few meters up, not a foot, not half a foot, several feet. And to
Like
to
6 feet.
get the blood there, yeah, 6 feet. So to get the blood all the way up that long neck, they have to have a blood pressure at the level of their heart of around 220 over 180. Now, for folks listening, if you listen to my hypertension, high blood pressure episode, and I'll link to that, you know that normal human blood pressure is 120 over 80. But for giraffes, it's 220 over 180. How do they do that without, having a heart attack or a stroke or heart failure because they have to do it day after day? If a human had to maintain that blood pressure day after day, their heart would fail. So cardiologists are very interested in this high blood pressure and how giraffes can live with it and what it could teach us, about our own treatment of high blood pressure. So that they're fascinating animals. And I just
Yes, they
wonder,
are.
yeah, how did you first get interested in them?
I met a giraffe at a zoo when I was 16. And I say met, and that's with quotes. Um, we were at the Washington National Zoo. We were visiting. I grew up. You mentioned in the intro. My degrees are from Clemson. I actually grew up in Clemson. So
Okay.
my aunt and uncle lived in Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is one of the suburbs of DC.
Yes.
And we went up there the summer before my senior year in high school. And one of the things they did is we went to the zoo. I'm 16. My brother is a college student at this point. I probably had just finished let me think about that, probably finished his freshman or sophomore year. I'd have to stop and do the math, and I'm not going to do it. My sister was coming into the 10th grade.
Mhm.
And there we are with our parents and our aunt and our uncle. What 16-year-old wants to do that?
Right. That's a good point.
And so, as much as I loved animals, I got tired because they were taking forever walking from, we were chatting and having a grand time.
Yep.
And as an adult now, I probably would have loved every second of it. But I just said, I'm going on ahead. I'll meet y'all further up. Back then, you could do that. These
Yes.
days, people are like, no, 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 no. But back then, you could. That shows you how old I am, y'all. But, but I got far enough ahead that it's like, I probably should wait. And lo and behold, in August, I found an empty bench in the
Wow.
zoo, and it was in front of the giraffe exhibit. So I sat
Oh.
down, and there was this giraffe who his I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember if it was a he or a she. I didn't know at the time. Now I can look at the pictures and tell you, but I've forgotten right now. But they just kind of locked on me.
Oh.
And when you go to the zoo, it's very unusual for an animal to notice you,
Yes.
and for a long period of time. Add that I'm 16, which means I'm very egocentric at this point, and if y'all don't know what that means, teenagers are egocentric. Everything's about them. About them. If someone's laughing, it must be they're laughing at them. Whatever. It's always about them. So here I am, 16, and I'm looking at this giraffe, and he's staring at me, and so I'm staring back. And this went on the entire time I waited on my parents. It
Wow.
was at least 15 minutes, if not longer. I
Wow.
took two pictures with my Kodak Instachrome camera. One of those things that you would put a flash on.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
how
old
old I
enough
am,
to
y'all.
remember that. Yeah.
So, you put film in it and you advance the film.
Yep, I had one.
So, So I took two pictures. They're not great. One of them, the giraffe is looking right at me, and one of them, the giraffe had turned its head for just a moment. Looking at the pictures now, I realize the giraffe was probably an adolescent giraffe. I jokingly
Ah,
have decided that they're going, how'd you get rid of your family? Free. I want to break free. But from that point on, I never had really paid attention to a giraffe
yeah, of course
beyond the
not.
fact that I saw them in pictures. I don't even know that I'd ever seen one in a zoo prior to that.
Right.
And from that point on, I was very fascinated with giraffes. But here was the interesting thing, just like the fantasies discovered, there wasn't a lot out there about giraffes that wasn't a kid's storybook.
Mm.
So I would find stuff, I would dig and dig and dig. And in fact, let's see, do I have it over there? I don't see it. That's weird. It's not there. I have a book. Now I want to know what I did with that book. I have a book that is called something like The Wildlife and Biology and Ecology of the Giraffe. And it was co-written by Ann Innes Dagg and another person whose name escapes me. But Ann Innes Dagg is a very important person when it comes to giraffes. She, in the 50s, wanted to study giraffes. Like me, she got hooked on giraffes in a zoo. Now, she was much younger. She was 4, and she saw a giraffe in the Chicago Zoo. And she got hooked on giraffes, and she wanted to study giraffes. But believe it or not, there wasn't a lot of in the habitat studying of animals at the time.
Yeah, well,
She
you
was
make
one
me
of the,
think of Jane Goodall, who,
yeah,
wanted to study chimpanzees and
right.
had, yeah.
So she had trouble, and she actually eventually did it on her own dime, pretty
Wow.
much.
Wow.
Um, it's fascinating. She has several books out about what she went through, and just getting someone to let her come was hard
Hmm.
because she was this young woman. And, in the 50s, young women didn't go to the wilds of Africa by themselves, much
Exactly.
less anywhere by themselves. And so she did this, but it was, by the skin of her teeth, and I'm going to do it. And
Wow.
it's going to happen. And it's a book she wrote, and I've learned a lot about giraffes from there. And what I will say, what you were saying about the cardiology
Hmm.
aspect, their blood pressure is extremely high. One of the things, are you aware that there's valves in their necks? Because when they drink water, what do? They have to bend way down. Believe it or not, as long as their neck is, because their front legs are longer than their back legs, their neck's not long enough to hit the water. So they have to spread their front legs, bend their knees, bend down to drink water. And so there's valves in their necks that prevents them from passing out because of the blood flow during that
Right.
time.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting about the high blood pressure is NASA was fascinated about their legs, and a lot of what they have done with spacesuits, they use the science they discovered from giraffes' legs, because you look at those long spindly legs and you look at their blood pressure and the strength. I can't explain it all, but it's
It's
just
like
fascinating to
I
me.
was reading, it's like they have their own compression devices, like their own
Yes, that's
compression
the
stockings. Their
right.
legs are like their own compression stockings to keep,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes. And it's kind of funny because you look at those legs and they look small unless you're right up next to a giraffe.
Yes.
Their hoof is as big as a dinner plate,
Wow,
and
that's
they can
true. Yeah.
kill with a kick of that hoof.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
So they're just the most fascinating animals. And the funny thing is, their long neck and their height is not the most interesting thing about them. And that's what I've learned over the years. So they're just really incredible and graceful. And if you ever get a chance to get up close to one, like at a feeding place in a zoo, do it and look at their eyes.
I have done that.
Oh
It's
my goodness.
amazing.
Oh my goodness. There's this deep liquid brown with these long, long lashes, and you could just fall into those eyes.
Yes.
But don't try to touch them.
No.
They don't like that. Unless they have been acclimated to it in the zoo, you're not going to be able to touch them. Some zoos, they're acclimated to it and you can, but most of them are going to pull back.
Yeah.
They're not going to let you touch them.
Yeah. So have you traveled the country seeing giraffes, seeing different giraffes in the different zoos or the different areas where you could?
I have. My husband knows if we go anywhere and there's a zoo with giraffes, we're going.
Yeah, right.
He just knows that's going to happen. We're going to have to go. So the first giraffe I ever fed was a calf in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, of all things. There's a place called the Boardwalk. Is that what it's called? I don't know. It's in North Myrtle, and which is a totally separate town. For those of you who don't know the Myrtle Beach area, North Myrtle Beach is separate from Myrtle Beach, but it's this huge shopping area, and they have this kind of animal thing in there, and for a short while they had a giraffe calf, and you could go in and feed the calf. And so that's the first one I ever fed. The next one was in Virginia, in the Virginia Safari Park, and that is somewhere near Massanutten, Virginia. I don't remember the exact town, but you can walk up onto a platform that puts you at eye level.
Wow.
I've been to the San Diego Wild Animal Park, so this is a safari park. In fact, my author photo was taken on that safari tour. We
Oh,
we went one time and I didn't do the safari tour because it was extra,
yes.
but they had a safari tour where you can feed the giraffes and the rhinos. So the next time we were back, I said, we're doing it. And so it was just my husband and I. We were there because he had something business wise. And so we stayed a few days because you're in California. Let's stay a couple of days, right?
Right.
So we went and we signed up for a 3-hour tour. Yes, are you hearing the Gilligan's Island speak? but but luckily there was no ship to wreck on this 3-hour tour. But we were the only ones on the tour. So there were 3 guides and us,
Wow.
which
Oh,
was amazing. And our main guide was Vicky Natoro, and she was a giraffe expert. So
ah,
I got to kind of quiz her a little bit. In fact, I had her this giraffing around book, the book I was telling you all about with the photos. I sent it to her and I said, can you just read through it? And if you're willing to give me a blurb, or if you catch anything I did wrong or whatever. And I said, plus, there's something I learned from you specifically. See if you can figure out what it was. She didn't figure out what it was, but she's like, I learned something from you. This book is really good. So
oh,
that was
cool.
nice. And I'll have that blurb with the book, of course, when it comes out. But she, because I didn't have to fight with a bunch of other people to feed the giraffes,
Hmm.
I let Bruce feed a few of them. Bruce is my husband, but I fed most of them. It was the coolest tour. And we fed rhinos. We just dropped apples and they would just open up their mouth and
Oh,
you just
wow.
drop it into their mouth. We saw an impala birth and caught
Oh,
it on video.
whoa.
Yeah, that
Whoa.
was they said that was unbelievable, that a lot of times they know there's been a birth
Yeah,
because they realize the mother is no longer pregnant, but then they've got to find where the baby is because the mothers will tuck them away somewhere.
right.
And in this particular case, we happened to come up on her giving birth. And it
Wow.
just so happened that my husband had his video camera going. So we have that video. So that was pretty
Wow.
cool. So that was, and I've done that one other time since then. I went with my daughter years later because she lives in California and I was out there for a workshop or something. And she and I went and did it, but we didn't get that kind of extra special treatment because there were a lot of people on the tour that day.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
So,
very
but there's been
different.
other places, even Greenville now, you can feed the giraffes.
Huh. Wow.
And I went to the one in Tennessee where the spotless giraffe was born. And before, unfortunately, that giraffe passed away.
Yeah.
But I did see that giraffe while they were still alive, and I fed giraffes there. I I've lost track. There's a tons of places you can go and do it. And if you ever get a chance, it's worth a little bit extra to do it. It's
Oh,
worth it.
yes. So was your encounter with the giraffe when you were 16, did that influence your decision to major in zoology at Clemson?
It did not.
Huh.
It did not. My career path has been rather wild. Um, I let's see, where do you start on this one? That's when I first started college, I was going to major in sociology.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, that probably was not a misfit. That was probably a good idea for me. But life happened, and I ended up having to leave college for a while. I got married, I had some kids, and I started back in school when my kids were 2 and 1. I don't know. I have to go back and do the, but they were little. It was started very slowly, but I decided by then everybody was talking about computer information systems,
Mm.
computer science, whatever. So I was like, well, I've got kids to support. I guess I need something that I can definitely get a job in. So I started majoring in that. Um, Moved back to Clemson. I actually was in a different town at the time and started at a local school. And then I moved back to Clemson and I discovered I wasn't really loving computer information systems. The programming wasn't for me. I tend to be a big picture person, not a detail oriented person.
Yeah.
And you need to be pretty detail oriented to do computer programming.
Yes.
And so I sat down. My dad was dean of the College of Sciences at the time.
Oh,
And
okay.
I said to him, Dad, I really like my biology class, but I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And so he had me meet up with this lady, Dr. Dory Helms. She had come to Clemson and started the freshman biology program for the people who were in the biology and sciences majors. And I sat down with her and she went over, things I could major in with an interest in science. And there were two I was actually interested in because keep in mind, now I'm a single parent, by the way, with 2 kids. So things I might would have done otherwise wouldn't have worked. I
Right.
couldn't have gone to the Peace Corps, for example. I
Right.
couldn't
Yeah.
have gone and done like the fantasies did in Africa and studied giraffe faced, I couldn't have
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah.
So I was interested in either occupational therapy
Mm-hmm.
or the environmental field.
Mm-hmm.
And occupational therapy meant I would have had to have moved after my sophomore year, assuming I got into an occupational therapy school, and I'd have had to gone to Charleston, South Carolina. And my father's like, no, 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 your kids will end up in the Charleston schools. Whatever. My husband grew up in that area. So, but that was my dad's thought process.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay. And he had some guy who was very focused in environmental sciences, and they were working on a, a cognate, I guess you would call it, or a sub degree
Ah,
in the sciences. It was going to be in the industrial biology,
okay.
and so I opted to do that. And until that came into being, they just said, well, you've got to either do zoology or botany. So I did zoology, and industrial biology never happened.
Ah, okay.
It never came through. So I did I did as best as I could to create something that would be environmentally related. So I did a life sciences minor. I took some business classes too, which were so much easier than my science classes. Oh my goodness. I would come from invertebrate zoology and come into like an OSHA class. And I'd say, oh yeah, I took half a page of notes in OSHA. You want to see how many pages of notes I took in zoology?
Uh, yep, like half the notebook. Yeah.
Half the notebook, yes, front and back. So
Right.
it was crazy, but that's how I ended up in zoology. It's a really roundabout thing. I did a senior project, the effect of pollution in stream and lake water on daphnids, which
That's highly
and
specific.
it's very specific, but it was what this particular person who was trying to get the industrial biology program going could do. He was kind of my project advisor or whatever.
Right.
It got me a lot of job interviews because I put it on my resume. And
Uh-huh.
people would say, I got to talk to her. I
Yeah.
got to know what this is all about. So I would get a job interview just because my resume had this weird thing on it and people wanted to know, which was kind of cool because then plus it didn't hurt that I could write a good um, cover letter,
Yes.
so I usually would get an interview anyway. And then they'd see that and they're like, I got to talk to her.
Yes. Oh, that's great.
So that's how that went about. The irony is I only worked on the periphery of environmental. I ended up as an insurance underwriter for a company that did pollution liability for fuel tanks, like at the
Oh,
gas
wow.
station.
Yeah.
And, and then I progressed. I didn't do well pushing paper,
Yeah.
sitting at a desk. So I
No, I
progressed
can't
out of that.
see that.
Yeah. And my job went like this. I did a lot of different things. I did sales, I did recruiting. I was a public speaker. An actual public speaker was my job title. And then I landed into corporate training, and I spent over 30 years in corporate training.
It's always amazing to me how people's lives and careers progress and the ups and downs and how it almost never turns out the way you think it's going to.
No, oh no, that's what I tell people. I said the degree is what matters in the sense that it teaches you how to think.
Yes.
It teaches you how to process. But the degree does not necessarily get you the job. Now, the one thing looking back that I used to say is I probably should have majored in English with a minor in like graphics or something like that. But my father convinced me that you couldn't get a job with an English degree,
Mhm.
which ironically, he thought I could get a job with a zoology degree. So, but I
Yeah.
did. So I guess he was right. But for the longest time I was like, I would be a great technical writing. I took technical writing in college, and my teacher was like, you're one of the few students who actually can do it. And I was like,
Yes.
well, I would love to get a technical writing job. She said, so would I.
Yes.
So, and that's what I discovered. If you want to be a technical writer, they were looking for people not with the technical background, but with the writing background. And I didn't
Exactly.
have the degree in English, so people didn't want to hire me. So and then I got the communications degree years later. The master's in communications came. I was, I had my own business, but I was also doing corporate training through the continuing education department at Greenville Technical College here in Greenville. So companies would come in and say, we want supervisory training, we want leadership training, we want communication, we want teamwork, Myers-Briggs, all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I was teaching for them as an adjunct, and they had a position come open, but I was not acceptable because I didn't have a master's.
Oh, okay.
So I went back and got my master's. Not that I ever got for the master's, but I'm glad I did because the communications degree. Well, you say you got a master's in communications and a bachelor's in zoology, and I say I can talk to animals, but
That's great.
but I learned a lot that helped improve the corporate training I did.
Absolutely.
It gave me a lot, and there's a lot that I learned in that I use in workshops I teach in conferences now,
I'm
writing
sure.
conferences.
I'm
You
sure.
know,
Yeah.
I do a thing on character development using the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator.
That's wonderful.
Uh,
Do you know that I am actually developing characters based on the Enneagram? So,
are you? Yeah,
yes.
that's the one I wanted to do, but I never got the certification in it. But I am certified in Myers-Briggs,
So
and
which
I
Meyer
have
may I
thought about,
ask? May I
huh?
ask which Myers-Briggs type you are? Do you want to share
You can
that?
ask. Yeah, you want to take a guess?
Okay, let me let you guess first since could you guess mine since you're the expert?
Hmm. Because you do the podcast, you're a writer. This is y'all. You need to know. Except for meeting her a few years ago, this
Yeah.
is the first I've seen Yasmine. So
So, so
part of
this
me
is
wants to go on the whole. Okay, she's a cardiologist.
yeah. This
I'm
is
going to
really
say INTJ.
right on. Oh
Are you
my goodness,
serious?
you are amazing.
I'm not
And I
always
got it,
that good.
only like less than 1% of women are INTJs too. It's
Yeah,
very
it's
rare
small.
for a woman to be an INTJ. I can't believe you guessed that. That's really
I can't
amazing.
believe it either, to be honest with you. And the fact that the NT, there's reasons why I picked the NT, and it has a lot to do with what your specialty is.
Ah,
But NTs are people who have that N and T combination are a very, very small percentage of the population too. It's like
interesting.
5% of the population are NTs.
Is that
And
right?
here's the thing with NTs. NTs are where most of our um, breakthroughs come through, medical breakthroughs, software breakthroughs, a lot of inventors are NTs also. So a lot of the people who take and for those of you who don't know, the N means that there's this intuitive ability to see things and the patterns of things and to step back and look at what's going on. And it's like a sixth sense almost, because they pick up something that other people are like, how'd you get that? The T is a person who makes decisions based on fact. And it's a very
The
objective form of decision. Huh?
T stands for thinking, right?
Yeah,
T
yeah,
thinking. Mhm.
but those are not. I tell people when I teach it, don't let those become labels to you,
Yeah.
because the opposite of thinker is the feeler, and feelers think and thinkers feel.
Yeah.
So I tell people don't let those become. But the thinker is a very methodical way of decision making. You add the J to it, and even more so.
Yeah.
Um, which I won't go through the whole thing right now. So if you want to do that, I can talk
This
to
is no,
anybody.
this
Just
is that
contact me.
that is so fun. That is so fun. Now I don't know that I could guess yours. I'm
Give it
gonna
a
say
shot.
I. I'm gonna say I and IS. Hmm. Maybe ISFJ or ISTJ.
I'm ENFJ.
Oh, I was totally
So you got the FJ, you got the FJ,
okay.
but I'm an EN. And I would have students sometimes guess it in the class. And because I was a corporate trainer, I had to be more detail oriented than I am naturally. And
Ah,
so they would pull
guess
the
it.
S out of
Uh-huh.
there.
Yeah.
Also, I would try to keep us on track, which meant there wasn't a lot of side conversation going on. So they would think that was the I, but that's not the I at all. The I has to do with what energizes you.
Yes.
And so, I'm an E because it's one of the reasons I love corporate training, why being an underwriter didn't work for me. E's are energized by the environment around them and interacting with people.
Yeah.
So that's why I love doing podcasts, because I get to connect with somebody.
Yeah.
Um, I'm getting a high off of this right now, you know.
And after we're
Um,
done, because I'm an I, I'm going to have to go take a walk in nature and
exactly,
right.
exactly. And it's not that I don't do those things, but I don't need them as much as a person who's an I does.
Right.
And then there's the whole aspect of people don't understand that everybody has an introverted part of their type and an extroverted part of their type. My
Yes.
introverted part is the N, which is that intuitive part, which is the creative part, which makes sense because writing is more of an internal
Yeah.
process.
Hmm.
You know, my extroverted is the feeling part, which
Hmm.
made me really good in training and sales.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Oh, I love
and
this.
luckily I'm
You-
a J.
Barbara, I love how our conversation has taken so many different turns here, and unfortunately, we're gonna have to pull it
Yeah,
all together.
I understand.
Before I get to that final question I ask everybody, I want you to do two things. First, could you show everyone that mug that you have that you showed me,
Oh
the
yeah.
one you're using today?
Okay. So you have the giraffe on the front, on the back, it says hold your head high.
Hold
That was a
your
gift to
head
me.
high.
Hold your head high. That was a gift to me. I have a lot of things related to giraffes. In fact, I'm looking at my desk right now, and there's probably about 30 giraffes in this little corner over here. People give me giraffe items all the time, and that mug was given to me years ago by a dear friend.
I love that. Yeah. And then secondly, please tell everyone where, once again, where can they find you online, find your books, sign up for your newsletter, all of that.
Okay. So barbaravevers.com is my website. There is a place on the website where you can sign up for my newsletter also. I also have a link tree, but that's a little harder to find. It's Barbara V. Evers on Linktree. So if you know how to find that, it'll take you, it's got links to everything, website, my books, my social media, and everything like that. But besides that, if you're looking for me, it's going to be Barbara V. Don't forget the V, Evers. And on Facebook, it's Barbara V. Evers, author. That'll be my Facebook author page. I have a personal page that's Barbara V. Evers. And if I don't know you, I'm not accepting a friend request from you, but you can follow me on my Facebook author page. In fact, my personal page will point you to my author page if you end up in the wrong place. My Instagram is Barbara V. Evers. Most everything's either going to be Barbara V. Evers or Barbara V. Evers author. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook regularly. I do have a YouTube channel. I have TikTok that I sometimes show up on, not as much as I probably should. Maybe down the road, who knows? But and I'm on other types of social media, but the main ones you're going to find me on are Facebook and Instagram.
All right. And folks, if you sign up for her newsletter, you will get a short story every other month, which is very cool. And not to mention all the other good stuff that's in Barbara's newsletter. So, Barbara, final question. You know, the motto of positive vibes is keep
Mhm.
on the sunny side. So, how do you keep on the sunny side?
Well, part of it's doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
If you haven't figured out, I like to have a good time. I like to have fun. And so I do my level best to do that. It's not always easy. Nobody's perfect, but I try to focus on the positive and focus on, what's good about something. When I was a little girl, we would go to the airport and pick up my grandmother when she would have come back from visiting my aunt and uncle in Washington. And I would go into the little bookstore there, and I found a bookmark one day that said, um, if you get lemons, make lemonade. I
Yes.
may have been 10, and I picked that up and I got that. I loved it. And it's
Yes.
kind of been my motto. Not long after that, I found a Bible verse that has become my biblical motto, which is today is the day the Lord has made, rejoice and be glad in it. And so I try to remind myself of these things throughout the day. I'm not perfect, but you know what? I get to write and I get to tell people about my books and about giraffes and meet people like Yasmine, who I never would have known. And I'm raising two grandchildren. I've met all sorts of people who live in the area where I live that I never would have met if I wasn't raising these two grandchildren. And was it what I expected in life? No, but there's always a silver lining somewhere. So I
Absolutely.
try to find that and try to focus on that. And that's how I do it.
That is fantastic. That is true positive vibes right there. So, wow. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being on the show and for sharing so much about yourself and your books and your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I love that you have that interest in giraffes. It made for for me to be able to present things a little bit differently than a lot of the other things I've been on before, other podcasts and so forth. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much again.